Hi everyone. Is it possible to do free motion embroidery or free motion quilting on a hand crank? Well, we need to make sure the machine is set up first. So there's a couple of key principles for free motion embroidery and free motion quilting that you need to do on any machine. So I think it's important to just show you that first. Then we can see whether it is actually possible to do it on a hand crank. The first thing with in free motion embroidery or free motion quilt, or free motion, let's just say free motion, and you'll see this on lots of YouTube videos, and you'll see this on posts and discussion boards on Google. You have to have the ability to disengage your feed dogs. Now, as you know, the feed dogs are pulling the fabric away from you. With free motion, you need the ability to be able to move the fabric around in any direction without the feed dogs impeding that. So most modern machines, or mainly modern machines, will have the ability to drop the feed dogs down completely. You can, I think on many vintage machines, there is the ability to drop the feed dogs. You can also get a cover that covers the feed dogs so that the feed dogs are no longer engaging with the fabric. Or you can simply cover your feed dogs to stop this. So for example, if I do that, I'm just using a bit of low tack masking tape, and I've stopped the feed dogs now from touching fabric. Another suggestion is to set your stitch length to 0 or like teeny tiny. And what that does is it stops the feed dogs from going in a backward direction that way. And the feed dogs simply are just going up and down. So that can help as well. But the first thing is to eliminate the feed dogs. You can, if the other option is to actually remove the feed dogs. You can do that on vintage machines. The next thing it suggests for free motion is to use some sort of hopping foot or a darning foot. And this helps to control your fabric. You don't have to. You can just have no foot on your presser bar at all. But if you choose to use no foot, you have to remember to drop the presser foot down, because that is going to engage your tension. A hopping foot or darning foot also has a level of protection or visual protection so that you're not getting your hand too close to the needle, whereas without a foot, you've got the ability to get very close to the needle and you could end up hurting yourself. Now, whether you have a foot or not, with free motion embroidery, you're normally using a hoop, whereas with free motion quilting, obviously, you can use a hoop, but it does mean taking that hoop on and off quite a lot. So if you are doing free motion embroidery, now let's see if I can sneak this under the machine without causing damage. Okay, so I now have a hoop under my machine. If you don't use a foot at all, when that needle goes down and comes back up, the hoop itself is having a tension effect on the fabric. It's stretched it out, so it means that when the needle is going down and coming back up again, there's a lot less movement in the fabric. However, now let's see if I can hook this out without breaking the needle. Oh, it's so annoying. Hang on, let me pause that because I've buggered it. Okay, try that again. So, if you are doing some sort of free motion and you are not using a foot, let me move that out of the way. If you're not using a foot, when the needle goes down, fine. When the needle comes back up, it's going to suck that fabric up. Even, at the moment, you can see that would not even form a stitch because the needle is pulling up the fabric, which means your fabric needs to be under some sort of tension. If you had a presser foot on, a hopping foot, so this is just a standard hopping foot. Now, even though I put the presser foot down, I can still move the fabric. It's not actually holding the fabric until the needle goes in, and then it puts a layer of pressure on, and then when the needle comes up, the hopping foot itself is holding that fabric down, so it stops your fabric from bouncing. But a hoop will, because the hoop is under tension, that will also help to prevent upward movement with the fabric. So that's the first thing to think about is the actual fabric going up and down. The next thing, and it is tension on the fabric. With a hoop, the fabric is already under tension. If you are not using a hoop and you're doing free motion quilting, you need both hands to hold that fabric. It's not only, it's obviously it's moving around, but it's holding the fabric. If you had a hoop, you'd be holding that hoop and moving that hoop back and forth. So if I take this foot off for a moment. Now we know that if my needle goes up and down and I'm not holding the fabric and there's no tension on the fabric, it will suck that fabric up and you're not going to get anywhere with it. But if you're holding the fabric, I'm on a treadle, so if I'm holding the fabric, I'm using my hands to stop or to reduce the amount of bounce with that fabric. Great. Okay, so it means that having the ability to have both hands and hold the fabric, you are creating a level of tension or stretch with that fabric and the ability to move at the same time. So on a hand crank, that's one of the issues that we need to look at, is the actual tension side of the fabric. Now, I'm not going to talk about your thread tension at all. The tension, like when you're doing normal sewing, you need to be able to adjust the tension for your embroidery or for your quilting. And that is just trial and error just to get it right. Most people will say to have your tension set at relatively normal. So on a machine that has a dial, it would be around 3 or 4. And you just make tiny little adjustments until you're happy with it. Now, the other thing that I've come across with free motion in general, not necessarily embroidery or quilting, I'll just say free motion because it's a mouthful to keep saying embroidery and quilting. If you're using 2 hands doing your guiding, then you're using your foot to control the speed, whether that's with an electric machine or with a treadle. So if I start off with, and I'm using my treadle, and my foot is doing all the movement for the speed of the machine, which means all I need to do is just concentrate on my hands. And the brain has the ability, let me just stop. Your brain has the ability to allow your foot to be doing something and your hands to be doing something completely separate. Your brain can disengage your foot and your hands, and it can do its own thing. Your hands can be doing their own thing while your foot is doing something completely different. With a hand crank free motion, your right hand is going to be doing all the cranking and your left hand is doing all the movement. Your brain finds that difficult to disassociate both of your hands. And a good example of this is if you've ever tried to tap your head with one hand and rub your stomach with the other hand. Some people can't do it. Other people, it takes a lot of concentration to do that because your brain has to disassociate both hands because they're doing things completely separate. So we're going to do it now. I've shown this example just with the foot and the needle on a treadle, but now we're going to have a look at what we need to do with a hand crank machine to get it set up to be able to do free motion. So let's get that set up now. Okay, so this is a 99K hand crank. It's threaded up ready. I'm just using a standard needle, but and I know my tension was right the last time I was sewing with it, so I'm not going to worry too much about my tension. But let's just have a look and see what we need to change. So obviously most of the time with a hand crank, it's in a wooden base, which means you've got, move that way a bit, which means there isn't actually a flat space on this, like a flat space on this side, unless you've got an extension table. There is plenty of space for your right hand, but you're not going to be using your right hand at all. So the focus is on your left hand. Now, I don't have a plate. I haven't got the ability to cover my feed dogs or drop my feed dogs on this. What I can do is reduce the stitch length to 0. So that's okay. I can, that's part of the feed dog problem resolved. But the other problem with hand cranking is your ability to be able to move the fabric. And because you're only working with your left hand, that starts to make it difficult because half of your palm is going to be falling off the side. And also, and actually that would be the same with an embroidery hoop. I mean, I'm using quite a large embroidery hoop. It's so big, in fact, you can't see it on the camera. No, you still can't see it on the camera. But that embroidery hoop is much wider than the base. So even then, the ability to be able to move your hoop around, there's gonna be it catching, and obviously it tilting or at the wrong direction. So with a hand crank, you have to be able to set it up. Forget the feed dogs a minute. You have to be able to set up a big enough space around your machine so that you can have this space on the left hand side, because predominantly it's your left hand that's going to be doing all of the work. So what I've done is I looked at my machine. This video actually is being done in the kitchen, so I had a look around. Well, what have I got in the kitchen that I can use to help? Because the key principle with hand cranking free motion embroidery is your ability to use your left hand, but that fabric has to move as smoothly as possible without any resistance, because as soon as you get any sort of resistance because of the bed of the machine, it's going to, I don't know if I can do this without starting off the needle, but you're going to get that sort of thing happening. What I can do actually is just show you that. So there's my back thread. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm just holding my front thread. I'm just going to get the fabric set up. Actually, let's just use one piece of fabric, because normally if you're using free motion embroidery, usually you're just dealing with one piece of fabric. Quilting, on the other hand, you've got a quilt sandwich going on, so it's thicker fabric. But first of all, let me just show you. So I'm just going to engage so that I can pull up the bottom thread, and they always suggest this in free motion videos. So I'm going to, my presser foot is dropped down, and I need to just lock those stitches in place, but you'll have to do it with one hand. So as you can see, okay, so those stitches are locked. That's locked in place. I'm not going to worry about, I'm just going to move those out of the way. So now to try and hand crank with your left, you're focusing on, I'm going to do this very, very slowly because I want to show you how the fabric behaves. So you're going to try and move, and can you see there's bunching starting up? You might have to pause that's starting to happen. It's causing a bunch, and that's partly to do with the foot, and that's partly to do with the resistance the fabric is having with the base. So I'm not even making a thing, but it's definitely, you can definitely see it starting to kind of bunch away. That's also because normally you would have two hands doing this. So with the left hand, you can't create movement and tension. I mean, you can see I'm trying to split my fingers to do this. So one of my fingers is going to get damaged. It's very difficult. And I think that's why a lot of people go, no, not doing it. It's impossible. So we're going to do a bit of Blue Peter now, because what I did was I had a look at what we had in the kitchen and went, ooh, that could work. So if I bring this to about here, and let's just get rid of, oh, and guess what? Just like all my other videos, I never know where my scissors are. I didn't bring them in, so I had to use kitchen scissors. Okay. So I had to think about what I had that I could use that could create a frame around the crank, but also thinking about the resistance of fabric and maybe putting something on top to help to make the fabric glide. So I created, now, no, you're not going to see it. Let me bung him out of the way. So I grabbed what I had in the kitchen, and what I created was a piece of cardboard with a cutout in the middle, some little legs made out of pot noodles, and then a piece of greaseproof paper going all the way across. And you can see I've clipped that with bulldog clips. Greaseproof, obviously, is non-stick, so I wanted something that was non-stick. So this took about 20 minutes for me to make. I just used some glue for the feed dogs. So I will show you what that now looks like when it's on, attached to the machine. Now I know I might need to change my camera angle, but I'll do that in a sec. So this creates, I'm just going to take the camera off its mount so that you can see that. So that's what it creates. So it's just slid on, and it's done two things. It's given me a harder base to glide my fabric over. It's grease proofed so that the fabric's going to slide. And at the same time, it's also covering the feed dogs. Now, so that's step one. And let's pop that back there. Let me see if I can get a good angle for you. Yeah, because it's all going to be happening on the left now. So let's start that again. Now, because you're using greaseproof, you've got to punch a hole through. So I am just going to, now the greaseproof isn't going to affect at all. Did that catch? No, let me try that again. Put the feed dogs down. Right, let's try and pick up the bottom thread. There we go. Okay, so they're both ready, and put that back. So that the greaseproof paper will slowly start to create a bigger hole with the needle going back and forth, so I'm not worried about that at all. So now, when I put my fabric under, I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to send the... okay, let's pick up the bottom thread again so that it's going through the fabric. And there we go. All right, that's step 1, 2, I think 3. Okay. So straight away, I mean, you can see just how slipperier that is. So now I'm just going to add a couple of knots just to get going so that we've locked that a bit more in place. It's not perfect, but it's a start. So now, same thing again. I'm going to just hold my hand, but now I've got a bigger space to work with, and I'm just going to crank very slowly, and straight away you can see there is that little bit less resistance from the fabric, and I can push, but it's still causing a little bit, not as bad as it was, but it's still happening. So what we need is something to hold down, because if I had someone with me now and they were cranking, I can do that without the fabric starting to buckle. And I'm thinking, okay, so what have I got available to me that I can use? So what I did was I took one side of an embroidery hoop, and with a million loom bands from my daughter, I created rubber stoppers. So the rubber can hold the fabric. So let's, I'm gonna need my scissors, hang on, let me go and get them. Okay, I found my scissors. So let me just, actually no, let's, yeah, we do need to have two, yeah. So let's get that out of the way. Snip it off. Right. Now I'm going to pop the fabric back under. I do need to bring that fabric up, but let's just, we will do it one step at a time. But this time around, I'm going to use this. So let's, oh, we're going to have the same fun, aren't we? Let's see. If I'm doing the mistakes with you, you get to see my mistakes, and then you get to see how not to do it. So let's try and get that under. Okay, that is under. Let's put the hoppy thing on. Oh, see, nice and slidey. Right. Press the foot down. Let's bring up the top thread. I haven't even started hand cranking yet. All right, top thread up. So this time round, instead of putting my hand on the fabric, I'm going to use this. Now the little rubber bands will help to grip the fabric. So let's just do some knots to get us going. Okay, I'm going to move those out of the way. This time around, I'm just going to hold my hand on the my makeshift hoopy thing, and try and do the same thing again. This time I'm going to just move the fabric around, but the hoop is going to act as to help hold that down. Okay, so what I'm finding straight away is still a little bit of resistance from there, but it's hard to hold the hoop. So I've got a bulldog clip, and I'm just going to pop that on there. So now I'm using a bulldog clip to engage with that fabric. So let's try it again. I'm just doing it slowly for now. And I'm just slowly moving in different directions. And then what I can do is I can lift and move this about a bit more. And that's helping to, no, it's still, maybe my fabric isn't big enough. Let's try it that way. And hook it like that. Because that will still grip, yeah. Actually, let's put my clip there. Let's see how that goes. Might be that just, nope, still not working. Oh, disaster. Let's move my fabric back a bit. because we're not going to get much pretty embroidery done if all we're doing is causing that kind of buckling to begin with. So let's just move my fabric around. Okay, so it's kind of working, but it's not brilliant. I think there needs to be a bit more work on that. I also think, I mean, the greaseproof seems to be working well. Let's see what a hoop will do. So let me take this off. No, I'm not going to make you watch this. I'm going to pause and then get the hoop set. Right. Hoop set up. And I'm going to use that bulldog clip again. The threads are already nearly knotted. So I'm going to try the same thing again, using the hoop this time so that it will help with the fabric tension. And I just want to move away from those knots. So I'm not really doing much at the moment, but that seems to be working better. Okay, I need to try and get those out. Let's hook those away, and I can't see them. Oh, there's one and two. Okay. So that seems to work. I seem to have better motion, like free motion movement, just with a little bit of hand cranking and a little nudge with this. So it's just with one hand. All right. So now let's have a look at what we can do and how our hands and our brain has to disconnect from everything. So from what I've seen on YouTube, and a lot of professional free motion people talking about, is the speed of that needle. So from what I've seen, the faster your needle is going, obviously fast is good, but your movement with the fabric has to be very slow. So that means your right hand has to crank like the clappers. You have to crank very, very fast, but move with your left hand as slow as possible. And what you're doing is creating teeny, teeny, tiny little stitches. If you move with your left hand too quickly, obviously that's going to create a bigger stitch and it's going to be baggy. So this is where the practice comes in. So I think it's a good idea to have some sort of setup like the way I've done with the greaseproof. You can use cling film. I have tried it with cling film, but I find the cling film literally clings, whereas the greaseproof does create a better glide for your fabric, because what you don't want is any resistance. I still have to try and work that out, how I'm going to do that if I wasn't using a hoop. So for the time being, okay, I can show you that you can free motion embroider because you're using a hoop. You could do it with a quilt. It just means that you're constantly taking the hoop off a bit of the section of the quilt and then putting it back on, which just sounds long. You want to try and, be able to just get started. So what I'm going to do, I'm not paying attention to any designs. I am literally just going to go free motion now. You may want to think of a design of what you want to draw with your machine. And you can use your hoop or your fabric and just do some quick designs using a fabric pen. I'm not going to. I'm just going to muck about. But what I'm going to try and do, or try and demonstrate, is I'm going to crank as fast as I can, and I'm going to use my left hand to just be very, very slow. What you find is your hands and mind, you're all trying to be in a rhythm, so that every time you crank round, your needle goes up and down, and then you create the movement. A bit like trying to stay in rhythm. And the idea with this is you've got two separate rhythms completely. Your crank is operating at one rhythm, completely different to the movement and the steadiness of your left hand. So that's the principle of it. Let's see if we can get it to work now. So I am going to start by cranking really fast, and I'm going to try and start creating some sort of freehand swirliness. What I might do is just move that bulldog clip down a little bit. Oh, okay, that's hard on the hand. Tell you what, you're going to definitely build up muscles in your right hand. So let me just show you what I just did a bit closer. So there you go. So it's trying to keep a steady left hand and start creating swirliness. What I'm going to try and do now, so this is the sort of thing that you would see on free motion quilting. A little swirly loveliness. What I'm going to try and do now is do a drawing. So I'm going to draw, I'm going to attempt to draw a wheedling. I did do another video on a wheedling a long time ago. So I'm going to try and do a wheedling for you. Let's see if I can set up the camera a bit closer for you. How about that? Yeah, that's a bit better. Okay, so let's get my drawing pad. And let's move that down. So the greaseproof is definitely working. Having the bigger stand here is better, and the fact that it goes beyond the machine. So that seems to be working. Now I would like to be able to lift the fabric, lift it up and start at the beginning, at the bottom, but I'm just gonna continue. So I'm going as fast as I can, but with my left hand I'm going as slow as possible. And I just want to make my way down to the bottom of my drawing board. Right, so now I'm gonna draw a wheedling. Now I want to just make sure that I can do this. I mean, I suppose that's a good thing with a hand crank, or even if you were free motioning with an electric machine, you can stop at any point. So let's do wheedlings. That sounds like my bobbing is going to run out of thread. That's lovely. It might not be. I haven't really sorted out I don't know whether the tension is right, but it seems to be working okay on the front. But can you see that I'm trying to move the fabric? Yeah, that was, oh, what a shame. Okay, I just ran out of bottom bobbin thread, which is annoying. But hopefully, nope. So hopefully you can see what I was trying to do then. The start of a wheedling flower. I need a lot more thread. I found that with free motion anything, you're doing so many millions of stitches and you use a lot of thread. Plus, I actually don't know what it looks like underneath. Let's have a look at what it looks like underneath, because it might just be a horror story underneath. Let's take this off. Let's get this out without having to take the needle out. Yeah, just a little bit. Oh no, it was just my I wasn't running out of bobbin. Okay, so that's obviously what we were just having a muck about with. If I turn it upside down, apart from, yeah, it got caught there, but the tension on the back's not too bad at all. So I'm happy with that. It means for my machine, I didn't really need to worry about tension. I can see just could do with a couple of little tweaks, but it's not too bad. But what it means is you can create free motion embroidery, or yeah, free motion embroidery. I haven't mastered quilting yet, but the free motion embroidery bit, why won't that go under? Free motion embroidery seems to work. It is about focusing on your movement with your left hand. So so to start with, yes, hoop, because I clocked that. I've shown that works. A bulldog clip on the hoop itself, something that's not going to cut or scratch your machine underneath, but that gives you the movement with one hand. Because it's giving you, let me just back this up a bit. All right. Because, oh dear. Right, so because you're using the bulldog clip, you can create, you know, straight away you've got full control over that fabric with just one hand. Yes, I know, you know, for people that are left-handed, they're going to find this a bit easier. For people that are right-handed, you know, you're essentially drawing with your wrong hand. So it takes time, but you've got to minimize all the external forces working against your fabric, which is friction. So you can, you know, eliminate that. I've definitely found that greaseproof paper gives you a nice, easy sliding around without resistance. The greaseproof paper is also hiding your feed dogs, so you don't have to worry about either buying a plate for them or removing your feed dogs, as long as you've got them on the tiniest stitch. Although I've just had a look at my machine, mine was still set to 12 stitches per inch, so my feed dogs were having fun under there, but the greaseproof was stopping the feed dogs from interfering with the fabric. So it is practice, but it is about just this gliding motion. Okay, embroidery hoop, excellent, great, it works. I need to master the quilting bit, so I might just pause the video and just get my machine rethreaded, and I'm going to just try one more time. So you can either stop the video now, or well done if you've kept with me this far, because I've waffled a bit again. But yeah, you might want to stay and just see how if I can do the quilting. But you know, I hate that it didn't work, so I want to keep trying it to make it work. So I'm just going to pause and just go and get some more fabric and my needle thread, I think, because I can't see the needle. All right, let's try this again. Number one, I've got a slightly bigger piece of fabric, and number two, I'm gonna try out something different. So if you see that on the camera, this I've bought off of Amazon. This is a Brother free motion guide grip. It's basically a shoehorn size, but it's just like an embroidery hoop. It does have these two ears that come up. You know, so normally you would be holding both hands around, but it does mean that you can grip on one side. And then if I turn it over, it has these rubber things. So it's very similar to my makeshift hoop thing. It's doing the same sort of thing. Plus, by holding it down, it will hopefully limit the resistance, the upward motion of the fabric, and shouldn't cause me any bucklage. But let's try again. So just gonna knot this fabric down a few times. That didn't quite go too well, so let's hope it doesn't knot. So same thing again. I'm actually going to turn this so that this piece is my grip, and okay, it's causing a little bit of movement, but the good thing with this grip is I can bounce up. Let me just try and move. What I want to do is get rid of this. The ends a bit. Right. Try again. I'm going to work my way this way, or move the fabric across so that I can attempt a wheedling again. But I'm just using, it's just the one piece of fabric, so let's just move over. And then I'm going to lift and move again. Right. Now I'm going to create the wheedling again. Let's move you over a bit so you can see what I'm about to do. As I say, this is quite good because it's got that section cut out, so I can weave that in and out. And it's a little bit better than the hoop, but I did have the hoop set up first, but well, clearly it's not gripping as much as I would like. This has got a little bit more weight on it as well, so that helps. Right, let's create a wheedling. Again, you can see I'm moving very, very slowly with the fabric, but I'm moving quite fast with the hand crank, and I'm trying to just ignore what my right hand is doing and just focus on what I'm doing with my left hand only. Because you kind of want a nice smooth motion. And do not be moving your fabric too quickly. Oh, that's a bit of a fat pedal, but that's okay. It's just practice. You just practice and don't use your good fabric. I'm using calico. Okay, so there's my little wheedling. Right, let's take this out because I want to just try. So that's definitely working a bit better. This grease-proof setup works. It could do with some refinement. The pot noodle pots aren't going to last very long, but a wooden version would be good. There you go. There's the wheedling, all done on the hand crank and all with one hand. It looks like it's waiting to get picked up by my mummy wheedling. Okay, I just want to try one thing because it's all very well doing it in a hoop, and with an embroidery hoop, you're normally working with one piece of fabric. So I've grabbed a bit of patchwork fabric just made out of scraps. It's got a piece of fusible fleece on the back, and then it's got just a layer of calico. This is normally what you would have going if you were doing a proper quilt. So I want to just see how that's going to work with 3 pieces of fabric. And how, because that's the quilting side, because the embroidery side is the hoop and normally one. I don't know if do they use more than that on embroidery? I don't know. Press it down. Let's pick up that bottom thread. Hook that out the way. I'm going to take some of these clips off. I think normally you use pins to hold down your quilting bits, but I'm just going to let's lock that in place. These I know are going to be in the way for a minute, so this time round I'm just going to, yeah, that seems wide enough. This time around I'm just going to do some curly-wurly thingies and just see how that works. But this time round it's obviously a couple of layers of fabric. But same sort of thing. So I'm just going to go, yeah. So nice and fast with the hand crank. Ignore what your hand is doing. Yeah, let's get rid of those. And what I'm actually going to do is snip that off. And then we can do some wiggly whirly things. Let me see if I can. Okay. So fast as you can with your right hand, slow as you can with your left hand. Let's see how this goes. A little bit of jerkiness, but carry on. Ah, there you go. I have just run out of bobbin thread. It was going to happen. Okay, so the whole sewing through 3 layers, that works well. Okay, I've noticed 2 things are happening. My right hand hurts because I'm cranking so fast. My left hand hurts because I'm at a funny angle. But it is possible. It is absolutely possible to hand crank with one hand. Okay, my curly whirlies need some work, and I don't know whether it would be good to have like to pre-draw my design so that I can follow with the needle. It might just make it easier to help me guide, especially at the beginning, because it's my left hand doing that drawing. But okay, definitely got some bobbin ghost going on there. But I mean that seems to work. I'm gonna obviously continue practicing with this a lot. I think there needs to be just a few refinements with if I roll back, with my little makeshift table, and that's mainly because I'm aware of it shifting slightly. If I pull it back, I can see just how much of a hole that's created from the needle. I mean, it's fine, it's not going to damage the needle or anything, unless that's why I'm having little bobbin issues. I don't know. It might be that this my little sliding on and off mechanism just needs to be a bit more sturdier. Maybe some little rubber things on the bottom of my pot noodle pots. I'm not sure. I need to do some more work on it, but hopefully I've demonstrated enough that yes, it is possible to do hand cranking, that you can actually create with just the one hand some really cool designs, or the start of designs. Where's my wheedling? Oh, that is it. Upside down wheedling. You know, it doesn't actually take long to start working out, like to start drawing with it. It is definitely about having no resistance with your fabric, greaseproof, or I'm sure you could use a bit of Perspex, but I mean that's machinery level stuff. Greaseproof, everyone pretty much has greaseproof paper in their kitchen. Everyone will have a piece of cardboard, hopefully, and some sort of pots or something to create an extension table. With greaseproof, unfortunately, I found that it's very difficult to stick with sellotape, which is why I was using bulldog clips, because it doesn't stick. The sellotape doesn't stick to the greaseproof. Masking tape does not stick to the greaseproof. But bulldog clips, you can just clip it. You can clip it on and off. Have a go. It would be lovely to hear whether you've been able to do it. I will continue practicing, but the starting point, it's getting there. It needs more work, I think, but it just means it's possible, and it's this hasn't cost me anything to set up apart from purchasing this thing, which I've found so far is really, really good, because you can grip with it, because you can hold it with just the one hand, and it's got these rubber things on the bottom. But this one, which is just me wrapping a load of rubber bands, is doing the same thing. It's just it doesn't have that grip, so I need to kind of modify that, or maybe even cut a side off so that it has the same effect that this one has, of being able to engage that around the needle without having to fiddle about trying to get it under the needle. I hope that's helped. I don't know how useful that's been. I'm going to have to watch this back and see whether that was any good or not. But I hope something's come from it. But I'll wait to hear if you want to leave any comments and feedback to me. Maybe you've worked out a better way, or you've seen what I've done and gone, Ashley, I can do this way better. It'd be good to let know. Okay, see you later. Bye.